The body that controls the entire ocean floor has 168 member nations and one mandate: protect the deep seabed as the common heritage of mankind. It just spent 8 years under a Secretary General formally accused by member states of advancing the agenda of the industry he was supposed to regulate. To understand how that happens, how a guardian becomes the industry's ally, you need to understand what the ISA was built to do and what it was never designed to prevent. UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, was signed by 168 nations in 1982. Its central promise was extraordinary. The deep seabed, beyond any country's jurisdiction, belongs to all of humanity, not to be claimed, not to be sold, held in trust as the common heritage of mankind. The stakes of that promise were geological: a 4.5 million square kilometer abyssal plain between Hawaii and Mexico. The Clarion-Clipperton zone sits 4 to 6 kilometers below the Pacific Ocean surface. It is carpeted in what scientists call polymetallic nodules, rocks the size of your fist containing cobalt, nickel, manganese, and copper, accumulated over millions of years at a rate of millimeters per century. To govern the exploitation of those minerals, the International Seabed Authority was established in 1994. Its operating budget, funded by the contractors applying for mining licenses. That detail will matter. The Clarion-Clipperton zone holds an estimated $16 trillion in mineral resources: cobalt, nickel, manganese, the exact materials the electric vehicle industry requires. 1 metric ton of cobalt goes into roughly 25 electric vehicles. The CCZ holds more cobalt than every known land-based reserve on Earth combined. That number has made the ocean floor extremely interesting to mining companies, to governments managing critical mineral supply chains, and to the defense industries of every major power with a Pacific presence. It has made it less interesting to biologists, but they have been paying attention. 5,578 species have been cataloged in the Clarion-Clipperton zone. 90% of them have no scientific name. They exist in no other place on Earth. What the industry calls an untapped resource, scientists call an unrepeatable ecosystem. The first commercial extraction will be permanent. There is no version of deep-sea mining that ends with the nodules returned to the seafloor. The ISA's architecture has 3 structural vulnerabilities. They were present from the founding. First, the institution is funded by the contractors it regulates. The companies applying for mining licenses pay the operating costs of the body deciding whether to grant them. This is not a conflict of interest that developed over time. It is the original design. Second, ISA decisions require consensus. Any single member state can block new regulations indefinitely. For an institution asked to finalize a commercial mining code, a document requiring agreement from mining nations, environmental advocates, and Pacific Island states simultaneously, consensus is not a procedural safeguard. It is a structural veto. Third, the Secretary General serves an 8-year term, renewable. In 2020, with most member states unable to convene in person, Michael Lodge was re-elected in a near-empty virtual session. Lodge had a background in commercial maritime law. He had a reputation for administrative efficiency. He also had relationships with the contractors he was supposed to regulate that, it would turn out, went beyond professional. The institution designed to protect the ocean floor had been built structurally to answer to the wrong master. A 2-paragraph legal notice filed by a Pacific Island nation of 10,000 people changed the trajectory of international ocean law. The Republic of Nauru, 21 square kilometers of coral atoll in the Central Pacific, had found an obscure provision in the 1994 implementation agreement governing the ISA. The 2-year rule: if the ISA fails to finalize commercial mining regulations within 2 years of a member state's formal request, The ISA is legally obligated to consider exploitation applications anyway, regardless of whether the safety rules exist. Nauru filed that notice on June 25, 2021. Nauru was not acting alone. It was the legal sponsor of NORI, Nauru Ocean Resources, Inc., a subsidiary of the Metals Company, a Canadian corporation listed on NASDAQ. The Republic of Nauru was functioning as a legal vehicle for a Toronto-based mining company to trigger an international countdown. The colonial geography is not incidental. Pacific Island nations have become the preferred legal sponsors for deep-sea mining applications across the Clarion-Clipperton zone. Many of them are the same nations most threatened by climate-driven sea level rise. The same minerals being extracted to power electric vehicles are being mined in waters governed by nations that may not exist above sea level within a generation. The clock ran for 2 years. The deadline expired in July 2023. The ISA had been operating for 30 years. In that time, it had issued 31 exploration licenses, collected hundreds of millions in contractor fees, and held dozens of council sessions. What it had not done was produce a single completed commercial mining code. No binding safety standards, no environmental thresholds, no liability frameworks. The ISA Council issued a non-binding roadmap extending discussions to 2025. 2025 came. The code was still unfinished. A new Secretary General took office in January 2025 and reset the timeline again. As of 2026, there is no completed mining code. There has never been a completed mining code. The first commercial exploitation application had already been filed before the international framework produced a single enforceable rule. The absence of a mining code was not simply the result of procedural delay. Inside the ISA, a different process had been running for years. The formal accusation arrived in March 2023, not a diplomatic complaint, but a documented member state charge raised in the ISA Council chamber, naming Michael Lodge, the sitting Secretary General, for regulatory capture. Germany alleged that Lodge had used ISA resources to advance contractor positions in negotiations, that ISA legal communications had mirrored contractor legal arguments verbatim, that Lodge had pressured staff to facilitate mining applications. Other member states added their voices. The Deep Sea Conservation Coalition submitted formal documentation. The investigation went public in July 2024. The New York Times published an investigative report naming Lodge and 18 other ISA personnel in financial irregularities, misuse of institutional funds. A complaint was filed with UNOIOS, the United Nations Office of Internal Oversight Services. Lodge was not fired. He served his full 8-year term and left office in December 2024. The UNOIOS investigation continues. The environmental record running in parallel told the same story at a different frequency. A 2025 study in Nature revisited sediment samples from a 1978 test mining site in the Pacific. 44 years later, macrofaunal density was down 37%. Species richness down 32%. The disturbance had not recovered. A 2021 collector test by the Metals Company produced sediment plume concentrations 260,000% above background levels. These are not projections. They are measurements from existing operations in a zone that has never had binding safety standards. The unilateral move came in April 2025. President Trump signed Executive Order 12285, directing NOAA to accelerate deep-sea mining permits under domestic U.S. law. The legal basis: the Deep Seabed Hard Mineral Resources Act of 1980, a statute written 4 years before UNCLOS existed, at a time when the international framework had not yet been negotiated. The United States never ratified UNCLOS. In 40 years, no administration closed that gap. EO Wargreen 2285 did not close it. It exploited it. The Metals Company filed exploitation and exploration applications with NOAA in mid-2025. The first attempt at commercial deep-sea mining was now proceeding under national jurisdiction, bypassing the ISA entirely. The ISA's new Secretary General called it a violation of international law. A 37-nation moratorium coalition called for an emergency session. No AA revised its regulations. Those revised regulations were published in January 2026. The International Commons had just been claimed unilaterally, using a law written before the International Commons existed. Leticia Reis de Carvalho became ISA Secretary General in January 2025. Brazilian, a marine biologist by training, with 30 years in international ocean governance. She arrived with an explicit mandate: complete the mining code, restore institutional credibility, and investigate the Lodge-era irregularities. The reform is real. The investigation is active. Norway, which had announced plans to open Arctic seabed areas to exploration, paused those plans until 2029 under scientific pressure. The ISA Council sessions in 2025 and 2026 produced more substantive progress toward a completed mining code than the previous 8 years combined. And yet, the NOAA application from the metals company is live. The executive order is in effect. Carvalho is racing against a legal clock she did not start, in a jurisdiction she does not control. The ISA was not captured because Michael Lodge was uniquely corrupt. It was captured because the institution was built with contractor-funded governance, consensus-blocking voting, and a mandate requiring it to balance extraction and protection simultaneously, using resources provided by the extractors. The architecture made capture structurally inevitable. Lodge didn't corrupt a functioning system. He operated inside a system that was never designed to resist him. Every international governance framework for a global commons faces some version of this structural tension. The common heritage principle is not wrong. It is ambitious. It assumes the institution created to enforce it will be insulated from the interests it regulates. The ISA was never insulated. From its first year of operation, it was dependent on them. The electric vehicle in your driveway, or the one you're considering, requires cobalt, nickel, and manganese. The Clarion-Clipperton zone holds more of those minerals than every known land-based reserve on Earth combined. The supply chain powering the clean energy transition runs through an abyssal plain 4 miles below the Pacific Ocean, governed by an institution that has never completed its operating rules, and challenged by an executive order from the world's most powerful nation. The ISA was designed to protect common heritage. The first commercial mining permits may be issued before a single safety standard is legally binding. What happens to the concept of common heritage when it proves unenforceable is not a question for the future. That question is being answered right now.